Hello, everybody. My name is Scott Kidd, the Yacht Captain Investor Podcast, where we focus on investing in yourself is the best investment you can make. And I have the privilege today of having Dr. Benjamin Hardy today, a well-renowned author and one of my favorite authors. How are you doing today?
Scott, I'm happy about spending time with you again. It was fun meeting you. What was it, like 2 months ago, 3 months ago?
Some January, February, something like that. It's already been a little while, but yeah, it was really great. Finally, meet you in person. And so, for people that don't know a lot about you, just give us a little brief intro about yourself.
Awesome. So I live I think up compared to you. I live up in Orlando, Florida, down compared to a lot of people. So my wife and I have 7 kids. We adopted 4 from
Nice.
various parts. We got 4 adopted teenagers, 3 from the foster system. And then we have an adopted 16-year-old girl from Guatemala who we adopted last year. We also
Wow.
have 3 of our own biological kids. Their ages, we got 2 6-year-old twin girls and a 4-year-old boy. So
Wow.
yeah, so 7 kids, not what I was expecting. We actually, it was the big year when I was doing my PhD. I did a PhD in organizational psychology at Clemson University. And during my PhD, we were foster parents, and it took about 3 years battling the foster system in court for us to be able to adopt them. During that process, my wife and I were doing various fertility treatments, in vitro and other things like that, and just turned out, as is common, as is cliche,
Yeah.
for the in vitro to hit right after we adopted the 3 kids. And so we adopted, got pregnant, and then had the twins the same year. So that was 0 to 5, and then so it was
Wow.
a beautiful journey, and it teaches me a lot. I learn a lot from my kids. Very humble. It's humility training constantly. I know you've got some kids, and you said you're becoming an empty nester.
It's humility every day, and I'm from a big family. We were just talking about briefly there, one of 7 kids, so it's great. And growing up, there was always something to do. So
So I grew up the one out of 3. So I'm the oldest of 3 boys. I had it was a mixed childhood. Grew up great parents, loved my parents. Had a lot of trauma. My parents got divorced when I was 11, and it threw my father into a fairly extreme drug addiction. So he was dealing with all sorts of extremely heavy drug use that made it such that we really couldn't be around him. It got to such an extreme. And then I barely ended up graduating high school, but decided to serve a service and a church mission. And right before getting to leave for those 2 years, I got really close with my dad. We developed a friendship again, and he began the process of becoming clean from addiction. And it
nice.
was during those 2 years that I really fell in love with psychology, learning, writing. I filled stacks and stacks of journals, learned how to write with inspiration, learned how to write from a stream of consciousness, learned how to write. Like, there's a lot of research now. I could point to all of it on the benefits of journaling, whether it's healing from trauma, whether it's reframing your
Yes.
identity, whether it's setting goals and identifying with your future self, whether it's strategizing and making decisions. There's enormous amounts of research on it that I could point to now. But for me, back when I was on my mission, I was just writing and fell in love with it and was reading tons and tons of books, having powerful experiences. And so that's the experience that led me to wanting to become a psychologist. And ultimately, I didn't know what form it would take, but over time, it became, interesting to me to learn business psychology, and ultimately now what I call strategic psychology, which is a field and discipline that I've actually created. And so, during my PhD, I got very interested and became a professional author pretty quick, and began writing books on transformational psychology and eventually strategic and entrepreneurial psychology. And so I wrote 3 books with Dan Sullivan, Who Not How, 10X is Easier Than 2X, The Gap and the Gain. I wrote some of my own books, Be Your Future Self Now, and others, Personality Isn't Permanent. And at this point in time, I'm just extremely interested in psychology and strategy that leads businesses to scale very fast, very aggressive. And so that's led to my newest venture, which is called scaling.com. And now the new book that's coming out, which is called The Science of Scaling.
That's all great stuff. I know I've personally benefited from a lot of your books, and I had the privilege of pre-reading your new book, and it's a lot to come if you're a business entrepreneur. It can help you if you want to scale a lot. It is a very simple process. There's a lot of books that you see that are out there that tell you the theories about it, but this was more like a step by step process. But we'll get into that a little more. But I was thinking about your future self and stuff. And I know that's a lot. That's a really beneficial topic. It's been for me. How would one go through being your future self when their environment is pretty heavily against that?
That's a really brilliant question. And I always want to hear your thoughts on it too, and how it's benefited you and how you think about it, Scott.
Okay.
So usually most people's environment is very equivalent to their past, right? The past
Yes.
brought the environment to where it is. And one of my favorite quotes is, the system is designed to defend the system. So like, your current environment, it's a system that's designed to perpetuate itself. And it's also a system that's a byproduct of the past. And so being your future self now means that you're not letting the past or the present dictate the future, which is the common approach. And actually, there's a lot of research on future self as a concept that shows that most people, when they think about their future self, they actually use the past and the present as the basis for the future self that they imagine. And that's obviously, there's a lot of downsides to that. Number one, it's just not true. Your future self, just like your past self, is not the same person you are today. If you think about who you were 10 years ago, very clearly, you're not the same person. You don't have the same ambition. You don't have the same goals. You don't have the same worldview. You don't have the same situation. You see the world differently. You have different priorities. Certainly there are probably some relations, of course, but the things that mattered to your past self are not exactly what matter now. The things that you know to be true are not exactly what you thought about. And so future self, one thing that's super important to realize is that psychologically, your past and your future are not outside of you. We often think about the past as something external to us and back there, and it's something that we can't change, and it's driving us in the future is outside of us, and it's something we can't be aware of. Psychologically, both of those things are basically tools that we use to navigate the present. And the better we get at framing our past, the less we get stuck in cycles, unhealthy cycles, the more we can just learn from it and move on. Psychologically, and there's a lot of new research on this, the future is really probably 10 times the weight and 10 times the tool of the past. The future is primarily the thing that shapes our present and shapes our direction and shapes what matters to us and what doesn't. The problem for most people is that their future is based on their past and present, as I already said. And so to answer your question, your future self should be a tool that you use to simplify and disrupt your present, as strange as that may sound. So even Peter Drucker said this. He said that the best business people understand that the future is actually intended to disrupt and simplify the present and even potentially be an enemy of the present. So if you can set a future that is distinct, different, novel, right? And maybe you start with your future self and who that person might be and how they might live and how they might operate and what they might care about. But even just using the future as a tool, and even more specifically, a goal as a tool, the purpose of the future is to direct and guide your present, even specifically your attention in the present, what you see as relevant or irrelevant, what you see as a relevant pathway. And so basically you want to think about a very different, more empowered future self. And ideally, you want to use that as the baseline for who you are and what you do in the present. And what that will absolutely mean is that you're going to have to make hard changes in the present because the future is so different from the present. And so you're going to have to start stripping things away that no longer matter and start orienting yourself and finding more effective ways to be and live. And if you do this, your growth is going to skyrocket.
Yes, and I would agree because when I was reading about future self and stuff in your books, because I've always read about goal setting and stuff, and a lot of times they said make a plan to get to it. It was more of a now till then kind of thing, but that was a different way.
That's a bad way. Be
Yeah,
honest
no,
with you.
because it a lot of those always fell short for me because I got stuck on steps or whatever it was, and then whereas that helped me frame it like, well, I want to be here, so I have to walk myself back and plan myself back from there. And like, what would that person do at this time? If my environment was bad, I'd focus on, getting out of that environment to get to this environment where the future me would be living. So, and that would be one way I could bridge that gap and just keep moving towards being that person. But you raised a good point of it. None of this is outside of us. It's not external. Our future self is in here.
It's a tool. Our future self is a tool for living properly in the present and effectively in the present.
And that's what really helped me get to that future self. But you raised another good point is like we're never the same person we were yesterday, 10 minutes ago, or what have you, because we're constantly in a state of change. And especially as we get older, for me, I focus more on quality of things rather than the quantity of things. So the quality is the future me. So that I'm being that right now. So that's already changing everything. And, it was something that I know that is making more changes for me, because it makes you get clarity of purpose. What is serving you right now to get you to that future person?
I love it. How have you personally used the concept to disrupt, call it simplify a competitive environment, an environment that wants you to be consistent with your past? How have you used your future self to kind of simplify that and make in the moment challenging moves and then make power moves forward more in the orientation of the future you want to live as?
Well, and I would sometimes compare it to my past, I've never been like for instance, I always thought calendaring and organizing my stuff and my thoughts would just filling up my calendar, that would scare me, because I was like, man, I'm gonna be so busy. But actually, it optimized. I was like, future me is very organized. So all this stuff by calendaring, I'm actually done by 4 o'clock or whatever the time is. I'm done at whatever time that is, and then I end up can spend more time on what else I want to do. And I found that the doing that, it allowed me to take more breaks, which is actually much more beneficial.
Awesome.
It,
I just want to emphasize one thing, a few things that you noted. One is that you never want to operate toward a goal. You always
yeah,
want to operate from a goal.
from
And, to kind of go into some of the research in scaling, one of the things that's been kind of clarified to me is that you always want to make your future seemingly impossible, both in scale and timeline. So if you have a goal, and obviously we're talking about business a little bit, obviously we're talking about future self as an identity and as a person, but if the most effective future you can have is one that you don't know how to reach, right? And you actually do want it to be tangible. Qualitative is really important, but when it comes to scaling or aggressive growth, it's important to anchor that in like a tangible, in terms of, so like just as an example, again, as a business, say you're doing 5 or 10 million, a linear and an ineffective process of the future would be to base the future on the past, right? And so say you did 5 million in revenue this year or last year, it's linear to use the past as the basis for your goal, right? So I did 5 million, so I'm going to just use that last year goal to 6 million or 7 million this year. Much more effective to actually scale the goal up so high it seems impossible. So go for like 25 or 30 million next year. And the reason you would do that is because now that future is going to very, very directly impact your present, right? Your present environment. And it's going to say nothing you're doing at 5 million or very little of it has any effect or any efficacy towards now 25 or 30 in the next 12 or 36, 12 to 24 months. So now you have to start. That's a future that starts to your present very aggressively. You don't want it 5, 10 years away, because that's a future that's too far away. Just as an example, there was a 22-year-old man I was talking to, and I was asking him about his future self. And I was asking him, what's your biggest goal in your life? And he said, I would like to one day own a European soccer team. And I said, that's brilliant. That's a huge goal, right? Like this guy, like that's like a billionaire style goal. And he had a lot of reasons why he was very excited about it. And I said, well, when are you going to do it? And we all have arbitrary timelines associated with our future. And most of them are very arbitrary and very ineffective at impacting the present. The whole point of the future, again, it's an internal tool to shape and redirect the quality of your pathways and your purpose in the present. And so he said, I want to get there by age 55. And I don't know why he thought that was a acceptable age to own a European soccer team. But I just said, awesome. I said, what would happen if you just moved the timeline to age 30? And then all of a sudden he was like, well, to your point, we have all these believed steps that we need. If you're operating towards a goal, then you have in your mind incremental steps that you feel like you have to get there. Elon Musk actually calls these false requirements. But and so, well, if I moved it to age 30, I don't know if I could do that, because there's a lot of things that I thought I would need to do over these next 30 years, right? Like again, he's age 22 and he thought he'd have to get there by age 55. So he's like, well, I really want to get a PhD. I thought I'd have to run a firm, do X, Y, and Z, right? And I said, well, what would happen if you just moved it to age 30? And he was like, I said, would the PhD still matter? Or is that a false requirement? in Elon Musk's terms, is that optimizing something that should not exist at all, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the beauty of using the future more effectively as a tool, in this man's case, in this young man's case, is that it actually weeds out bad thinking. It weeds out bad processes. It weeds out it weeds out dead end roads that we all have placed upon ourselves a bunch of false requirements that are not true.
Yeah.
And so, the future is most effective when it's really, really scaled up to a level where you don't know how to reach it, and the urgency of the goal is short. And the reason for that isn't to stress yourself out. It's actually just to weed out all of the bad thinkings that we've placed upon ourselves, and then to enable us, honestly, to filter and find the most direct pathways to it if we're willing to approach the goal directly rather than avoid it as we've been doing.
Yes, and I know that one thing that it has helped me do, that future self, it has helped like optimize my timeline, like shorten the timeline rather than like, oh, I'm going to be done by next year or this year, or the year after. It's helped me like, well, why do this in 90 days? Or
Exactly. There are definitely direct pathways to date if you're just operating from your future rather than toward it.
And it brings like clarity of purpose, and has helped me say no more. No is a great thing. It's helped me out, like, because I a long time ago when I started being a captain, like there was a couple of people that called me Captain ADD. Like we would go into the shipyard and I just rip the whole boat apart, and I just keep going because I have a lot of energy. And when I was young, I would just keep going until I fixed everything. And a lot of times it drove a lot of people crazy because the boat would look like a mess, but in my mind, it was not chaos. But I've learned over time to the next, and you're most efficient when you're focusing on one thing. And I know you went through that, especially in your new book about scaling. It really kind of was at that point again when I reread it. I was like, well, I need to just kind of shed off some more of these things, because you start saying yes to things, and you got all these things that you shouldn't be doing, and it kind of an excuse for like, well, I still have to get all these other things done, but you really don't.
No, it's so true. Michael Porter, I should say Dr. Michael Porter, who's a very famous strategy expert from Harvard. He actually invented the field of competitive strategy. He said that the essence of strategy is what you don't do, right? And again, to the point of most people are optimizing things that should not exist. Really, the whole point of the future and the whole point of strategy is to eliminate the majority of things you thought you needed to do so that you can actually find the most direct and focused path forward. And that's really the point of such ambitious and urgent goals, is that they force you to start, this may sound interesting, but like in the future as a tool, you want the future to do exactly what you actually said with one of your questions, which is you want it to actually become the enemy of your current environment, not in a negative way, but like you want to have transparency about all the things you're currently saying yes to, all the things that are perpetuating forward that are ineffective, and that it's really only from such a high goal and such a more honest future that you can look at everything and start saying no to the stuff that shouldn't exist, and then start filtering and finding pathways forward. I'll just give one example just so it's super easy and relevant for people to understand. So Alicia Alt is a client of mine, but who is just an amazing woman. She's in the credit industry, and for the last 20 years, she's a one-on-one coach in the credit industry, and she helps people to improve their credit scores and essentially get their credit to a level where they can get home loans and things like that, or dispute claims. But 5 years ago, she created a software called Level Up Score, and the software is very innovative. It's something that nothing in the credit space has ever had this. And basically it allows, through AI, you basically put your goal into the system, right? You plug in your goal, they run in your credit, and then it actually gives you tailored one-by-one steps to your goal based on, and like no one says it's really effective. And essentially in the United States, there's about 50,000 credit repair companies that people hire. Like people hire these credit repair companies to help them with these kind of situations, to dispute claims or to like raise their credit score. And so the 50,000 credit repair companies are the people that Alicia wanted to start using this technology, right? This software. And so last year she started cold calling these 50,000 credit repair companies, and one by one calling them and explaining her software, Level Up Score. And they all fell in love with it. They're like, we need this for our clients. And so she had a 100% conversion rate. Every time she would call them, they would use it. And so after about 90 days, after like Q1 of last year, 2024, she had 10 of these companies using the software for clients, and she would have like a revenue share where every time there was an input, so she's essentially making a couple $100 a month just off these like 10 companies using, these 10 repair companies using it with their clients. Well, then I kind of explained to her this idea that the future shapes the present. And if you have an impossible goal, it's going to force you to find more effective pathways. And so what she did was she said, okay, in Q2 of 2024, I'm going to go for 100 companies using my software. In her mind, going 10x, that 10x jump would be an impossible goal. And basically what she quickly realized was that goal was not high enough, because honestly, like, even though it seemed high, like, she actually already knew she could achieve it because she could just make 90 phone calls during those 90 days and just do it the same manual, like linear, difficult way. And so I said, she actually thought about it herself. She's like, I'm going to move the goal up to 1,000. So she decided, I'm going to figure out how to get 1,000 credit repair companies using my software in 90 days. Now, once she set that goal, she realized there was no way she could cold call her way there as she did getting from 0 to 10. And so that goal, being seemingly impossible, forced her to start rethinking her strategy. Again, that goal was so big, she didn't know how to do it, which is actually the point of impossible goals. And so she sat down, she got quiet, she got in her journal, and she began just writing down potential pathways to that goal. And this is how our brain naturally works anyways. But she began just trying to strategize to the goal, and she thought of a lot of really bad ideas. None of them were going to get her there. But then after just a little while of meditating, even praying and journaling, she thought, like, the thought kicked into her mind. And this is why it's really important to actually like strategize your future, give yourself space to think about it versus just be busy doing what you've always done. But just within a few hours of setting that goal, she had the idea that she had not thought about or never had considered before, which was, why don't I just actually like collaborate with companies who are already software companies in this space that serve these credit repair companies? And she thought about it. There is several software companies in the credit space that serve thousands or even tens of thousands of these companies. And so what happened was, a day or two later, she was on one of those one-off calls with one of those credit repair companies. And she told the guy on the phone, she said, he first off was falling in love with the software, like everyone who she told it to. And she said, I really want to partner with other software companies in the space so that I can partner with them and maybe integrate this into their software so that we can begin serving thousands of clients rather than one-on-one and one by one. And literally the guy said, I have someone for you. And he connected her with one of his friends who owns a software company called Credit Repair Junkies. And she had a conversation with him the next day. He fell in love with the software and he partnered with her, and he has 8,000 of these companies using his software. And so like literally immediately her software began to be integrated into his process. They developed a deal, and boom, she now was in process of having 8,000 of these credit repair companies using her software. So she went from 10 of them to 8,000, literally. And so like one of the ways to think about it with pathways is that it's usually going to be through strategic partnerships, right? And and so in her case, her pathway before going directly to the companies, her pathway with the impossible goal, shifted, and it went to, I want to partner with companies who serve thousands or tens of thousands of these. And so that's kind of at the heart of strategy, and that's at the heart of pathways thinking is that if you don't have a goal and a timeline that forces you to find a more effective approach, then to the conversation we've been having the whole time, you're going to be operating from the past and present, dragging yourself and your current system and process into the future. Instead, you want a future that literally makes most of your present irrelevant and forces you to find much better ways forward. That's the whole point of the future as a strategic and as an effective tool.
Yeah, it's just proof that the goal you think, like initially she thought 100 were big and then 1,000 was a lot, but then it ended up dwarfing what she actually did.
Totally. And she did it literally in like a few weeks. But on her old path, it would have taken her years, and she would have burned herself out when she got there.
All those calls, and then she would have figured out how to manage it when a strategic partner, and I heard this a lot of times. Hey, you might only just need that one person or that one thing, and I remember reading Ed Milet's book, The Power of One More, just doing that one more phone call or sitting there for one more minute and walking through, what you need to do to find the process. And, she found that one person, and that was all it really needed, was that one person. That 1,000-person goal became 8,000 or customer.
Yeah. And when you begin thinking exponentially, you think in terms of leverage and even quality, right? And so, one person, absolutely, with the right who, one person can 5 to 10x where you're currently at, without question. It's just you're thinking in terms of leverage and you're thinking in terms of impact versus, and that's really how a lot of the best companies and the best people think. Like, you know, Bill Gates said that, you know, when it comes to creative tasks like writing code, a really good coder is worth, he, in his own words, not 100x an average code writer, but literally 10,000x a good code
Really?
writer, right? So like, you know, and you know this with sales, right? Like a really, really good salesperson is worth like, you know, 10 to 100x an average one. And so
Mhm.
when you're really wanting to go for a massive scale, right? You're going to need really, really leveraged, really powerful people, whether talent, whether that's form of distribution, whether that's some form of technology or something like that, that opens up opportunity. It's going to be like a few very like really impactful people that's going to make a massive difference.
It's so true. Like going back to the who I noticed because I have a meetup and a lot of times a friend of mine, he and I coined this phrase, the Who Finder, because a lot of times you that's who you need, and somebody has that who, somebody there, maybe in the room, somebody maybe in the next room, maybe on the next call. It really forces you to sit down. There was times in my life where I was doing way too much, kind of like my story I was telling on the boat. Like I could have easily just hired a few people to do it, but I didn't even really. I just kept going. I didn't really about it, and it would all been fine, and probably would have come way under budget and way less time and everything else, and it would have been a lot less to manage. Just goes to show you that the finding the who really makes so much of a difference, and her who was just that one person, and went from one client to 8,000, and
Yeah, that's the way you want to think in terms of leverage and in terms of, you know, really impactful people. And those people are going to do one of two things. They're either going to open up massive distribution for what you're doing, right? That's what that's what the software companies did for Alicia. Or they're going to bring such capability to what you're doing, right? They might, that's why acquisitions usually happen, right? Is because then it opens up new capability or new distribution, right? And so the new
yeah.
capability might just open up, just incredible opportunity for you, because now you've got like a skill set that's totally distinguished in the environment. Whereas like, so recently we brought on a partner in scaling.com. He's just got such capability that it transforms what we do. It makes what we do so much better. So that now what we do is so much more distinct and just incredible, but also it enables scaling to be a lot easier. We have that kind of capability on your team. And the problem that most companies or most entrepreneurs have is that their goal is not big enough to attract that level of talent. And because the entrepreneur places themselves at the center of the company, right, the center of everything happening, like the center node, everything has to go in and out through the entrepreneur. The type of super talent that we're talking about isn't really inclined to be in those kind of environments. They want more of an environment of autonomy, freedom, self-determination, which are all just core elements of motivation. And so usually the entrepreneur is the bottleneck of the company and stops the company from growing, because they're kind of what Jim Collins would call level 4 leader, where they need to be the genius. They need to be the one. So what happens when you actually scale the goal up really high is that usually that means your role not quite as,
Mhm.
and that's actually a good thing, because now you can bring on other people who can take things to places you actually couldn't take it yourself. And that really opens up
Yes.
incredible opportunity if you're willing to be that great of a leader and to be about you.
Yeah, and I had a captain that I worked for a long time ago, and he said, "You hire somebody that they can replace you, and they can take you out of your job so you can go and do all the bigger stuff." Because
Yeah.
if you're sitting there dealing with them all the time, that goes the same with if you're hiring a CEO, or you don't really want to be the center. If you're the center, it's all going to stop with you, and it's all going to be roadblock, bottleneck, and everything else. You need to get out of be able to hire out of your own way. And I learned that with hiring VAs and stuff like that, and other people in my life, especially on the boats, you want at any time the team can take over. Like if I go down or somebody else goes down, you need to be able to be replaceable. Not to say that what you're doing is not important, but it's just a job. If the chief officer can come in and take over, it's infinitely better than if something happens to you and nothing, and then everything stops. And that would be the same thing in business or any company. If you're the solopreneur and you happens to you or you stop working, the company shuts down. And I, in reading all your books and others, just getting to that point where it can work seamlessly whether I'm here or not, or whether I'm going or not, is always been the goal. But a lot of times you have to learn that hard lesson that you are probably your worst enemy and have to get out of your own way.
I mean, the sooner you learn the lesson, the better. Just realize that you're the bottleneck and that you should hire better people and let them go. And true leadership isn't managing what people do. It's getting everyone aligned towards a really phenomenal goal, enabling people to do things that they didn't even know they could. Uh, and and so you have to stop becoming a leader and start having a team of leaders and people who take ownership and are all aligned on the same goal. And incredible things can happen in very short periods of time when you've got super talent that's just as committed and just as excited as you are.
Yeah, that's so true. And with the new books, the advent of AI, are there any kind of tools you see that you have implemented, or things that you would recommend implementing in this scaling process in business that you think would be really helpful on the people side?
So I'll give an analogy. There's a great book by Tim Grover called Relentless, and Relentless is a performance psychology book. But he said in that book, and I agree with him, that if Tiger Woods used a crappy pair of clubs, he'd still kick your butt. Like, and yes, tools matter, but you could have the most sophisticated tool in the world and not know how to use it, right? And so it's like you could and so although things like AI are incredible, your future is really what determines the tools you should use. Of course, AI is important. We should, but it's just the main point of, like, don't get obsessed with the tools. Like that's a more tactical thinking. Although yes, the tool is incredible, but it's really your future and the scale of your goal that's going to determine what tools you use and how you use them, right? And so it's always the why that determines the what, right, and the how. And so I wouldn't point to any specific tools, but of course, we know where, the future is definitely going to be, there's increasing tools we can use. But Naval Ravikant, who's really smart, said something really awesome. He said, in an age of infinite leverage, judgment is the most important skill, right? And so judgment is about choosing the right goal and the right tools to use for that. And so that's more how I look at it. If you get really clear on the future that you're trying to create, and you're really clear on that that's the right thing to scale, then I believe you can start finding the right people and tools for the job. And we have less and less excuses because of of just the sheer incredibleness, like the sheer power of the tools at our disposal. But you could also use these tools to go the wrong direction, right? To blow yourself up, right?
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, it's like the advent of a lot of different things, electricity and, the computer and internet, social media. People can use it for a lot of, very terrible things. And AI is no different. It's a lot
of people are going to be sitting on AI watching porn for days and hours.
Yeah,
like, I mean, it's like, or doing terrible things, right? But it's just a tool.
Fake, making these fake videos and stuff. I'm sure they're already doing it, but I mean, it's just another thing where, people ask me the question all the time. Well, is AI going to replace me? I said, no. Potentially someone who's better at using AI and doing your job may replace you. He may be able to do the work of two or three people at that time, maybe, but I don't think it may make some jobs go away, with robots and driverless cars and stuff like that. But that's a whole nother conversation, and you're still going to need the people to come up with that goal. Like, the driverless car, for instance, didn't just happen. Somebody thought of that. Everything was a crazy idea at some point. Everything around us, electricity, driverless cars and stuff. And no, that's interesting. It's still about the people. And
one thing I'll say that is becoming more and more clear to me is in Tony Robbins actually wrote the foreword of the Science of Scaling, and he said that the thing that he's noticed about people, and especially after reading the book, he really resonated with the book, but he said the thing he noticed is that people's problem isn't their intelligence or their ambition. It's that
Mm-hmm.
it's literally that they set their sights way too low.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about it from a systems perspective, like human systems, and there's a lot of theory on systems. It's just that human systems do exactly what you tell them to do. And so most people, they build businesses that do what they told it the business to do. They shoot for revenue or goals that they just deemed that's as high as I should go, right? And so the whole
Yeah.
point of what we're talking about here is, why don't you just shoot 10 times or 100 times higher? And why don't you use that to shape the system you built, the team you built, the path you build, and see what happens, right? Yes, it's going to be different than what you've done, but it's going to actually force out all your bad thinking, all your bad process. It's going to maybe lead you to better who's, right? Better people, better tools.
Yeah.
And that, and so I think that's, I forget who said it, but just like the biggest aha and the biggest kind of mistake that people generally realize isn't that they shot too high and missed. It's that they shot too low and made it, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like,
True.
you know what I mean? And so the whole point here is set your sights, actually go for true scale, set your sights 10, 100 times, 1,000 times higher, give yourself way less time than you think you can. Be honest and transparent that most of what you're doing right now would have to take on a different form if you want to, right? You don't have to scale, by the way. No one has to. I mean, you can just keep doing what you're doing. But it will lessen what you could have done and who you could have been. And we often sell ourselves short on what could have been possible, especially in business. I think it's strange with business, and especially in the US, that we set we don't really set true goals, and we don't apply true strategy, and we don't reach true levels of innovation and growth. And one of the people who I really enjoy, his name is Tyler Cowen. Have you read any of Tyler's books? He's an economist, but he wrote a book. He's written a lot of great books. Average is Over. He wrote about the Great Stagnation about America, but he wrote a book called Hidden Attachments, I think it's called. And anyways, the whole point of it is that, like, in order for a country and a country to thrive, or even a business, it needs economic growth. Like, economic growth is fuel and lifeblood for society. I mean, and if you're not growing a lot economically, if you're stagnating essentially, then you're struggling, and there's just not a lot you can get out of it. But if you're having really good economic growth, like, there's all sorts of not only psychological and societal benefits, but just like there's a lot of good that comes out of growth. And so growth is a good thing. Obviously, you don't want to be a cancer that just grows for the sake of growing, but you want to, but
grow with
don't be, but don't be afraid to grow. Like, don't be afraid to do something big, impactful, important. You're not going to just stumble upon that, though. It's not just going to accidentally happen if you're going for linear goals.
Yeah, grow with a purpose, I would say, and in reference to what you were talking about, not setting high enough goals. I would argue that it's almost harder to stay at that struggling level than it is to.
It's way harder.
It's going to be hard anyway. It's going to be hard anyway, whether you're working or not. So you might as well go for the bigger ticket, or the bigger goal, because you just might make it.
Well, but also, to even Alicia's story, to the young man who's 22, it forces out bad thinking. It forces out bad process. It forces you to be more honest with yourself, and it enables you to find the most effective, scalable approach and path, and to do the best good you can. And so, going for the higher objective actually improves your process in the present. It allows you to see all the things you're doing that are dead ends, or you're optimizing stuff that shouldn't exist. You're doing what you were doing before, when you were like doing all the stuff with them. Going for the better goal forces you to start to look at these things a little bit more honestly and say, I could probably stop doing that now. And I probably should, because now I can see that it's costing me a lot. And so I should probably go find a much better approach. And so the beauty of it isn't just the goal or its achievement, but that it forces you to be a lot more thoughtful. It forces you to find better ways, and it forces you to let go of the many things that you're currently doing that are very ineffective. And sometimes it takes looking at it from the lens of an extreme frame of reference, a very high and urgent goal, to start to look at yourself and your habits or your ways of being, your system, your approach, your team, your clients, everything you're doing, start to allow you to look at them from a lot more higher level of honesty and realize, man, a lot of what we're doing is just kind of grinding, not really doing much at all. And if we just strip this stuff out and focused on a more simple, focused way, we could really get far. We really could.
Yeah, it's easy to feel tired after you're doing all that busyness and stuff like that when you're not really, one thing that I've learned to do is ask the question like, is this serving me? Is this serving my future me? And it helps me take a pause and step back and everything else because it's like, well, no, it's really not. Okay, move away from that, and then forces you to make those choices, and that's really such a great process. And I would argue that simplifying it can be really tough for a lot of people because they have all these things and it makes them feel comfortable. What would you
Busyness can't
recommend?
scale. Complexity can't scale. Busyness and
Yeah.
complexity can't scale. So if you're happy going in 15 different directions, just know that you're missing out on 10x or 100x growth that could have been yours in less than 3 years. It's
Very
true.
true.
Honestly, like that's the cost. The
Yeah.
cost of being busy, the cost of being distracted, the cost of complexity and having too many competing goals or priorities and bouncing around like a ping pong ball is that you're
Yeah.
not making the impact you could and you're not scaling. You're moving at probably 1/10 or 100th the speed you could if you just actually set a clear goal, let go of all the complexity and found a more focused, scalable path.
Yeah, that's so great. So what is next for Dr. Benjamin Hardy after releasing this book? I believe it's June or July, something
Yeah,
around.
July, The Science of Scaling comes out. Um, in terms of family, it's just helping my teenagers live better lives, spend a lot of good time with them before they go through what you're going through. And in terms of scaling.com, our objective is really simple. I think that that's what happens when you set an impossible goal is it forces you to define yourself more clearly. And our only objective is to help companies 10x in 3 years or less. And so we help people do that. And so I'm just going to get better and better at learning this process and teaching it and helping companies apply it. That's pretty much all we do. Just helping people be far more, apply better psychology and strategy to their life and then do that to better aims and to make better decisions and become better leaders and ultimately to the end of scaling very aggressively and powerfully. And that happens, by the way. It happens that you grow very quickly when you're not repeating the past and you just quickly
Mm.
you let the future shape the present rather than the past. Scaling happens very quickly. It's mostly a psychological battle. And it's exactly, it goes straight back almost to your first question about looking at everything that's really there, being honest about it, and then beginning to let go of the things that were great in the past. You don't have to be mad at them, but starting to be more accountable to the future. And when you do that, rapid growth is the natural byproduct.
Oh, that's so great. Well, as you are an author, what is your favorite book?
That's a fascinating question.
Or
I
favorite
don't,
recent book? Easier question.
yeah, I don't know if I have a favorite, but there are a few really good classics. Definitely have like like the core, like religious texts, I mean, Bible and other things like that. Those are important books to study in my mind. In terms of business books, it changes pretty regularly. I would say that like I really like, I hate to get so hesitant.
There's so many though.
Yeah, it's true. Just give me a second on this one because I want to.
No, that's all right.
So I really like. It depends on the situation, right?
Yeah,
It depends on the context. I don't think I have like a one size fits all book. Um,
yeah,
I do like the book. It's not how good you are; it's how good you want to be by Paul
yeah.
Arden. Have you heard that one?
I have heard it. I believe it's on my list, and I have not read it yet. So
It's an advertising book, but it's a great mindset book. I like 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel. I like
okay.
Thinking in Systems by Danelle Meadows. These are all just like business and thought process books. Homo Prospectus by Marty Seligman. I'm more interested in like deep psychology and like
Hmm.
systems and thought process.
Nice.
I do like. Yeah, I'll just end with that.
No, that's fine because I know how I am. I read something that I want to learn in the morning when I get up, just kind of read through, and then
I,
I do my journal stuff. And at night when I want to relax, I read something that I want to like a story I want to read, but it's always got to be autobiographical or
Oh,
some
I love biographies.
historical, because I have a degree in history, so it's like a lot of times it's relevant history stories and stuff, because a lot of those lessons are still the same. We're still basically doing the same things that we have been for quite some time. Other than scaling, this is it's kind of a newer thing, and we've scaled in the past, but there was a lot less people.
Wow. Maybe you could take your thing to a whole new level.
Maybe so. Well, this has been really great. For people that want to find out about you and about your book, about scaling, where would they find you?
It's really tough. Scaling.com.
Yeah,
Just go
that's a
to,
tough one.
yeah, go to scaling.com. There's free resources. You can watch training on the scaling framework and things like that, how to think from your future, how to dispel all the noise and find the most scalable path. And for those interested, you can check out scaling.com and see if you're interested in actually becoming a member and seeing how far you can go.
That's great. And I know, having pre-read that and waiting for when the release comes out, I will be reading it again, and I think you guys should going to be in for a real treat, because it's a great book. So and that's all for today. That's the Yacht Captain Investor podcast. This is Scott Kidd, and we're out. Thank you.